agriculture to itself and directing all the investments toward the industry, this movement sought to transform and harness the agricultural output in order to integrate it into industrial production. The idea was to use agricultural products, mainly cannabis, to provide the industry with all the raw materials it needed. But there was a major handicap in making the production of cannabis a new billion-dollar crop, in which it envisioned a tremendous revival of cannabis plantations all around the world. But not everyone seemed to be happy with the future success of this miracle plant. At that time, the magnate of pink journalism, William Randolph Hearst, had bought millions of acres of timber forests, which he intended to use to make paper for his ever more popular tabloid publications.
That right there is why you Edomites don't deserve to be in power. You're cutting down trees, literally the lungs of the earth, to make shitty tabloid magazines. Madness.
With the return of hemp paper, far less expensive than tree paper, his empire was doomed to collapse in a short period of time. Another industry giant who was directly threatened by the return of cannabis was Lamont DuPont, the owner of the petrochemical company that had just bought the patents to create dozens of synthetic products from oil. Nylon stockings, brushes, men's clothing, and even tires for your car. And then Orlon, Dacron, synthetic sponges, cellophane, and a full range of products that would have been easily displaced on the market by their competitors made with hemp. Apart from the risk of losing millions of dollars, Hearst and DuPont had something else in common. They were both funded by one of the most powerful bankers of the time, Andrew Mellon. Andrew Mellon was also the owner of Gulf Oil, one of the so-called Seven Sisters. At that time, oil companies were expanding at great speed, but were likely to see their investments vanish by the mass production of cannabis, which offered a much cleaner and more economical fuel. Nor should we forget the young pharmaceutical industry, which was financed by two other powerful bankers, John Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie. These people were...
There we go, the Rockefeller family up there with the Rothschilds and pushing for the New World Order and pushing for the mandatory implementation of the microchip implant, which is the mark of the beast. And Rockefeller was behind the pharmaceutical industry, where all this medication is derived from oils, which is clearly not good for the body. And he also demonized holistic doctors and medicine back then. And what do you see happening now with a lot of these holistic doctors trying to bring back that knowledge? They die mysteriously.
Conducting an all-out campaign to eliminate the accepted natural herbal treatments, including cannabis, from the pharmacopoeia, while trying to replace them with drugs created in the laboratory. Furthermore, Rockefeller was also the owner of Standard Oil, which had already started to invade America with its refineries and its service stations. Thus was born this natural alliance between the synthetic textile industry, the oil industry, the producers of plastics and its derivatives, and the pharmaceutical industry. They all needed to get rid of the common enemy as soon as possible. Luckily for all, at that time, Andrew Mellon was also the Secretary of the Treasury. From that powerful position, he appointed his future son-in-law, Harry Anslinger, to be the head of the new Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Harry Anslinger had already had experience as a federal agent during Prohibition. His job was now to transform the crumbling bureaucracy of Prohibition, which in the meantime had been abolished, into a new weapon to combat and eradicate cannabis from the future of the nation.
The Treasury Department intends to pursue a relentless warfare against the despicable, dope-peddling vulture who preys on the weakness of his fellow man.
One, however, could not openly attack cannabis, which was a plant loved and respected by the vast majority. Hearst then had the brilliant idea to use the Mexican nickname marijuana, which was totally unknown to Americans at the time. In doing so, on one hand, he managed to divert the suspicions of the true objectives of the operation. On the other, by attaching the use of marijuana to blacks and Mexicans, it made it much easier to ride the growing wave of racism that was already sweeping across the country at the time.
That's why we call you Edomites the devil, which means deceiver. Here you are in the past and all the way up until today destroying the planet, but then you use your propaganda to blame all of society's ills on so-called niggers and spics. You Edomites got a lot to pay for. And now I'm going to jump to about right here.
Building on this misinformation campaign, Anslinger convinced Congress to enact new laws which provided that the smoker of marijuana would suffer the same penalties as that of hard drug users such as cocaine or heroin. In 1956, the first arrest for possession of marijuana carried a mandatory sentence of 2 to 10 years in prison. In some states like Missouri, a second arrest for marijuana possession could be punished with life behind bars. Now that America was under control, Anslinger turned his attention to the rest of the world, where cannabis was still being cultivated freely. At the United Nations, Anslinger began knitting a Machiavellian web of diplomacy based on the growing power the United States could now exert over other nations. In 1961, Anslinger culminated his career by persuading the UN to unify all single existing treaties on drug control. Thus was born the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, to which more than 150 countries adhered. The convention established an international tribunal for the control of drugs and committed individual states, among other things, to combat and eradicate as soon as possible the cultivation of cannabis. Within a few years, the production of cannabis would become illegal virtually everywhere in the world. The petrochemical industry had won its battle, while the world received in exchange the huge ecological disaster we are witnessing today: air pollution, the contamination of aquifers, rivers, and the seabed, wild deforestation, extinction of animal species, global warming, and most importantly, our slavery to oil, which could be erased at any time by simply going back to cannabis as the basis for all fuel production.
That son of perdition, that son of destroying, utter destruction, of vessels, of perishing, ruin, destruction, all for greed and profits. This is Habakkuk chapter 2. I'm going to read verse 4 to 5. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, speaking of Esau Edom, who does everything contrary to the scriptures and nature, who again does everything for profits, but the just shall live by his faith. Yeah, also because he transgresseth by his wine, that wine being his philosophies such as democracy and using his propaganda to demonize cannabis. He is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Once Esau got a lockdown on demonizing cannabis in the United States, he went to the UN to demonize it globally because his desire is as hell and as death and cannot be satisfied. He didn't want cannabis cutting into profits on big oil or cutting down trees anywhere on the globe. And you Edomites aren't going to escape for turning this planet into a waste. This is Jeremiah 51. I'm going to read 25 to 26. Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain. And a mountain simply means power. And the powerful mountain right now is Esau Edom, the wicked whom the earth has been given into the hands of Job 9 and 24, saith Yahweh, which destroyeth all the earth. As we just saw, with big business and big oil, you've got all these plastics out here. You've got pollution in the ocean. You've got the environment just falling apart. And I will stretch out mine hand upon thee and roll thee down from the rocks, and will make thee a burnt mountain, and they shall not take of thee a stone for a corner, nor a stone for foundations, but thou shalt be desolate forever, saith Yahweh, because you Edomites are the people whom the Most High has indignation for forever, as it says in Malachi 1 and 4. Whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom Yahweh hath indignation forever. This is the last hurrah for you Edomites. So any of you Edomites that may be watching this video, just live it up. Because after you're taken out of rulership, you're going to go into 1,000 years of hardcore bondage and slavery before your permanent eradication. And nobody's going to miss you once you're taken out of power. I'm going to close it off with Isaiah chapter 14. I'm going to read verse 5 to 8. Yahweh hath broken the staff of the wicked, whom the earth has been given into the hands of, in Job 9 and 24. The border of wickedness, Esau Edom, of Malachi 1 and 4. And the scepter of the rulers, you Rothschilds and you Rockefellers, and you DuPonts and you Mellons, and the list goes on and on. Verse 6,